I want to welcome you again to another session of our Bible study. I'm Fred Davis, pastor of Mending Fences Cowboy Church in Lebanon, Tennessee. They make this broadcast available to you, and we hope that it will be very beneficial as you consider what God's Word has to say. We are in the book of Matthew, chapter 27. We're looking at the events in the life of Jesus just before he is crucified on the cross. Jesus has been brought before Pilate. He is the Roman governor. And he asked Jesus, "Are you the King of the Jews?" Jesus' response was very simple. "You have said it." In other words, you proclaimed, I don't have to, I am the King of the Jews. So, Pilate went on and he says, don't you realize all of these accusations that have been brought before you? What do you have to say for yourself? And Pilate was surprised when Jesus said nothing. He said nothing. He didn't defend himself. He didn't say they're all lies. He didn't try to get out of it. He simply kept quiet. And Pilate was surprised with this. Verse 15 of chapter 27, "Now it was the governor's custom each year during the Passover celebration to release one prisoner to the crowd." That's the custom. It's a tradition that at the celebration of the Passover, whoever is in prison, they would release one of those prisoners at that time period. So, they would release him to the crowd. Anyone they wanted. Didn't matter. They could pick who it was. This year, there was a notorious prisoner, a man named Barabbas. As the crowds gathered before Pilate's house that morning, he asked them, "Which one do you want me to release to you? Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" The word Messiah means the anointed one. He knew very well that the religious leaders, that's important, the religious leaders had arrested Jesus out of envy. He knew they had nothing against him, but out of envy, they had him arrested. Just then, verse 19, as Pilate was sitting on the judgment seat, like a judge, his wife sent him this message. So his wife had sent this message. "Leave that innocent man alone. I suffered through a terrible nightmare about this or him last night." So, she had a hard time sleeping. Why? She knew that Jesus was innocent. And so therefore, this really bothered him. She sent her husband a message about this. Verse 20, "Meanwhile, while Pilate was deciding who to release and while all this was going on, the leading priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas to be released and for Jesus to be put to death." Do you get that picture? The leading priests. Do you understand? It was religion that killed Jesus. It was. We think of religion as quiet and meek, and we go to a chapel or church on Sunday and we worship and we go home, and that's the end of that, and everything is docile and mild. No, the religious leaders condemned Jesus and wanted him to die. Isn't that amazing? So, here's what took place. Verse 21. So the governor asked again, which of these two do you want me to release to you, whether Barabbas or Jesus? The crowd shouted. Now the crowd's involved. And they shouted back, Barabbas. Pilate responded, then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah? They shouted back, crucify him. Crucify him. The crowd was worked up, and they were saying to Pilate, release Barabbas, who they knew was guilty, and crucify Jesus. Isn't that amazing? Then in verse 23, Pilate said, why? What crimes has he committed? But the mob roared even louder, crucify him. In other words, the facts did not matter. It made no difference that Jesus was an innocent man. That didn't matter. The religious leaders wanted Jesus crucified. So anything that represents an honest trial did not take place. And the crowd was crying, crucify him, crucify him. He's an innocent man, Pilate says. Look at verse 24. Pilate saw that he wasn't getting anywhere and that a riot was developing. So he sent for a bowl of water. This is Pilate now, who was in charge, who could make this decision. He sent for a bowl of water. He washed his hands before the crowd. This was a sign, a symbol, whatever you want to call it, that Pilate was having nothing to do with killing Jesus. So he takes the bowl, he washes his hands to demonstrate that he had nothing to do with this. And he did this before the crowd so that everybody could see that he was having nothing to do with this. And so he said, I am innocent of this man's blood. This responsibility is on you. The crowd, the assembly, the high priest, the religious leaders. This is on you. So verse 25, and all the people yelled back, we will take responsibility for his death. Isn't that amazing? The whole crowd, the religious leaders, said, we will take responsibility for his death. And then they said, we and our children will take responsibility. So what they're saying is, we're taking responsibility, and this can be passed on to our children as well. They were that adamant about killing Jesus that they took full responsibility. Verse 26. So Pilate released Barabbas to them. He ordered Jesus flogged. That's the word that's used. It means to be beaten. So he turned him over to be beaten with lead-tipped whip. With a whip that had protrusions out from it, that had metal pieces in it. And so when they beat him with this whip, it would take hunks of flesh out of his body. Then turn him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. So here, the beginning of this devastation, this terrible, terrible trial system. They beat him and they turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. Isn't this amazing? An innocent man. Pilate said, I find no fault in him. Why? He's not guilty of anything. Why do you deliberately want him to be killed? Well, verse 27. Some of the governors, soldiers, took Jesus into their headquarters. So these soldiers had a place where they assembled. They would get together, they would prepare, and they would plan, and they would go out on their maneuvers and all this type of thing. So they took Jesus to their headquarters, listen to this, and called out the entire regiment. The entire Roman army of that day that was in that place, they were called together. So, in that assembly, what did the Roman soldiers do? Get a hold of this. They took and called out the entire regiment. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. Why? He's already been beaten. They'd taken him to the headquarters for the Roman soldiers. They strip him and put a scarlet robe on him. This was symbolic of royalty. In other words, he says he's the King of the Jews. Well, we're going to recognize him as the Jewish king. So they took a royal garment that was made of the color scarlet or red. They wrapped it around his shoulders. What were they doing? Making fun of Jesus. This Roman garment represented one of authority, and they were making fun of Jesus. They wove thorn branches into a crown and put it on his head. Can you get that picture in your mind? His body's bleeding. He's been stripped. He has a royal robe that's been put around his shoulders. Now they have taken a thorn bush with very long thorns. They've woven it together like a crown, and they put that crown upon his head. And then they placed a reed stick in his right hand as a scepter. They were saying, if he's the King of the Jews, we're going to recognize him as such. They put the robe on him. He has the crown of thorns on him. They gave him a stick like a sepulcher as a king would have as they carry out their authority. Here's Jesus. How sad to see this happening to him. Listen to this one. They knelt before him in mockery and taunted, making fun of him as they said, "Hail, King of the Jews." Boy, if he'd have lived in our time, every camera in the crowd would be taking pictures. Look at Jesus, King of the Jews. Here he has a crown, he has a royal garment, he has a scepter in his hand, and now the soldiers are bowing before him and taunting him. "Hail, King of the Jews." Watch this. And they spit on him and grabbed the stick from his hand Listen to this. And they hit him on the head with it. Folks, this is of the worst suffering a person could experience, especially a man who was innocent. They took the sepulchre, they hit him on the head with it, making fun of him, the King of the Jews. When they were finally tired of mocking him, think about that. They did this until they were absolutely tired of mocking him. They took off the robe, put his own clothes on him again. Then they led him away to be crucified. Here in the Roman soldiers' headquarters, it wasn't enough that they beat him with a whip with metal pieces in it. It's not enough. They put a crown of thorns on his head, a royal garment wrapped around his shoulders, the sepulchre taken, and they hit him in the head with it. You would think that's enough, but it isn't. So, they led him away to crucify him. These are the events in the life of Jesus when he was 33 years of age, at the prime of life. He's being mocked and made fun of before the high priest of the temple and the Roman soldiers. So, I want you to think on these things. We're going to take time to do that, and we're going to continue this in our next time together. I hope that you'll be with us. You'll watch this as we see what Jesus went through. We hope that your day will be a blessed day, nothing like what Jesus experienced.